One of the things I've been doing a lot of lately is watching these um, roller coaster videos, uh, whether it's just discussing like how cool they are or how dangerous they are, right?
Signature seasoning and buttery flavor.
Many
Okay,
have died on what was supposed to.
so King's Dominion is a park near Richmond, Virginia. It's pretty close. There's only two, uh, as far as I know. As far as I know, there's only two big amusement parks near Richmond, Virginia from the 3 years that I was living out there. One of them was King's Dominion, and the other one was Busch Gardens. And Busch Gardens was kind of close to um, that historic. It's not Jamestown. It's like Williams something. I don't know. It's one of these like original settlements, right? And the locals all love Busch Gardens more because they kind of feel like it's their Disneyland. But I've been to both of these parks, and I can tell you King's Dominion was better, in my opinion. Because they had like three big wooden roller coasters, they had a lot more rides. It was, it wasn't as like decorated and stuff. Like Busch Gardens was a little fancier to look at or whatever, but the rides were not, in my opinion, they were not that great. But in the videos that I've been watching, they've both had accidents, as has Disneyland, as has Disney World, as has the Cedar Fair stuff, Knott's Berry Farm. I remember when a woman fell off a perilous plunge. Um, and apparently that same ride is in a different park as well. And somebody fell off it at the other park too, because the harnesses don't accommodate obese people very well. But anyway, this is an interesting story, and I'll interject with some of our own harrowing adventures.
Be a good day, and many more have been left with physical and mental scars due to the gross negligence of park authorities. Everyone has a reason to be scared of metal death traps taking them miles off the ground, and it was for fear of his safety that 13-year-old Eamon McIntyre jumped off a roller coaster on September 3rd, 1999. So what exactly went down on that fateful day? What had
By the way, I don't think those are actual pictures of what happened. Based on how they describe it, it doesn't sound like he jumped out of a loop. He didn't jump out of a loop, you guys.
made the young man so scared that he risked his life to escape it? And what events occurred in the aftermath to solve it? The 2nd of September 1999 in Doswell, Virginia was a cool Thursday, the same as every other fall day in the area. The leaves were already turning bright orange. The smell of fall-themed snacks was in the air, and citizens were getting themselves into sweaters for the chilling weather.
Yeah, and they're about ready to close the park for the season too, because they can only stay open so long as it doesn't start snowing or there's like ice or frost. Because it makes the roller coasters way too dangerous. So if we're approaching, this is probably September. What did he say? Did he say September? Because by the time you get to October, they have to start shutting down operations.
For 4 young boys, Eamon McIntyre, 14-year-old Mike Crutchman, 13-year-old Adam Edwards, and his brother, 14-year-old Brandon Edwards, it was just another Thursday evening. Instead of spending the time at home, the boys wanted to take the opportunity to visit King's Dominion, formerly Paramount's King's Dominion, an amusement park in the area. Spanning about 280 acres with 13 roller coasters and 2 water rides, King's Dominion had become a staple in the area, drawing well over 48 million people since its opening in May 1975. In 1999, the park was the place to be if you were looking for family fun and relaxation, and the boys knew this. They were excited to visit the park and couldn't wait to start getting on the rides. One ride the boys were particularly keen on entering that evening was Shockwave. Opened on the 23rd of March 1986, Shockwave was a famous stand-up roller coaster located in the Candy Apple Grove section of the park, an apple-themed area that was and still is the largest section in King's Dominion. The ride was designed and built by Togo, a Japanese company, and it was the third stand-up roller coaster installation in their history. Shockwave featured 2 trains with 6 cars. Riders were arranged 2 across in 2 rows, for a total of 24 riders per train. And as the name implies, it did not have any actual seats like a regular roller coaster. Instead, the people stayed standing the whole time and were held in place by a harness, like a lap bar.
One thing you need to consider too is that when people go on these roller coasters and get knocked around a lot, like their heads are getting knocked around, that can cause confusion. It can cause it could cause a concussion. It could cause, some brain damage, actually. This is one of the reasons I don't like doing the larger roller coasters, because there can be consequences to it. And these little boys decided to do it 4 times in a row, and they're about to do their 5th ride, right?
Or an over-the-shoulder strap. Shockwave had a double restraint system with a shoulder harness and a waist-level guard to hold riders in place while they were standing. The harness system was to restrain and support the rider, so anything going wrong with it indeed spelled doom for the passengers. However, Eamon was no stranger to Shockwave. He had visited the park multiple times, and that evening alone he, Mike, and Adam had gotten on the ride 4 consecutive times. Brandon had just joined them, and they were about to go on it for the 5th time, when something began to feel off to Eamon. He was suddenly uneasy. A certain discomfort that hadn't been there before now leadened his bones. His friends had not yet noticed his unease, and Eamon wasn't exactly sure what it was. He chalked it up to nausea. After all, Shockwave did move at speeds of about 80 kilometers an hour, and claimed a height of 95 feet, and he'd just ridden it 4 consecutive times. He was bound to get sick. However, he wasn't about to chicken out in front of his friends, and he was bound to take one last ride with them. At around 6:30 p.m., Eamon and his 3 friends were strapped into their places, and that's when he realized what exactly was wrong. Even though nothing went wrong during their first 4 trips, and he was in a seat that either he or his friends had been in before, Eamon suddenly realized that there was something wrong with the harness. Before he could speak up about it, a ride operator came around for a standard check on passenger safety. The inspection made him breathe a little more easily. After all, a professional could tell if something was wrong. He remained in place as the ride operator pulled lightly on his shoulder harness to check it. The adult seemed satisfied that Eamon was secured, so he believed he was fine. However, when the automatic locks clicked into place, signifying the beginning of the ride, the boy realized he had not been securely fastened. Only 2 weeks earlier, a death had occurred on the roller coaster. Timothy Fan, a 20-year-old man, was thrown from the train's final turn at a speed of 64 kilometers an hour, sustaining a fatal head injury when he struck a steel walkway. The accident had made national news, and Eamon had undoubtedly heard of it. Shockwave had been shut down for investigations afterward, but it was reopened only 3 days later, when it came to light that the ride was in proper working condition. Timothy Fan had stubbornly refused.
It couldn't possibly have been in properly working condition if you have 2 people getting out of their harnesses within 2 weeks of each other, right? So either there was a serious malfunction with the harnesses, or they were not tight enough to actually secure these passengers into place, right?
Used to obey safety instructions, and had somehow managed to free himself from the ride, resulting in his death. That didn't stop Eamon from being afraid, though. Just that year alone, there had been 6 roller coaster-related deaths. Coupled with the one that happened on the very same roller coaster he was riding, Eamon wasn't about to take any chances. So, when the safety locks clicked in, and he realized he wasn't correctly strapped to his seat, he began to scream. "It's not locked! It's not locked!" Eamon's friends heard him, and so did some of the other passengers. They took up his cry, but they were too late. The ride was already moving, and they could not gain the attention of the ride's operators from their places. It was a woman walking.
We had this exact same experience on the Indiana Jones ride at Disneyland. My whole family because I used to be able to get Club 33 passes through work. And so I would take my whole family. We would pay for our own lunches at Club 33, and then we'd get the double passes for California Adventure and for Disneyland. And we were all on the Indiana Jones ride. I'm sitting next to my sister-in-law, and I think my son was in the row with us too, but he was further over. And my brother and my mom were in the row in front of us, and maybe like a family friend. I think there was a family friend up there. My mom could not fasten her seatbelt before they started the ride, because there's like two things. You got to fasten a seatbelt, and you also have to I think there's like a lap bar or something. And the lap bar is really not enough. Even though this isn't something that's going to go upside down, it jostles around quite a bit. You could totally get thrown from the vehicle. So my sister-in-law and me, we ended up having to grab her seatbelt and force it back and hold it with both of our mights to keep her in the vehicle for the entire ride. Because even though we were trying to get the attention of the loading crew to say, hey, she's not locked in yet, they didn't stop the ride, and they just sent us on our way. And she's lucky to be alive today, because we had to hold that seatbelt in place during the entire ride.
Passed that heard their shouting and hurried to tell the operator. Help came to Eamon almost immediately, and the operator instructed him to stay put while somebody signaled the chief operator to stop the ride. But with the death tolls stuck in his mind and his own unease about the ride, Eamon wasn't about to be a victim. Ignoring the operator's instructions, he slipped under his waist-level restraint and jumped from the car as it made its way up the coaster's first incline, about 30 feet above the ground. He landed on a catwalk, twisting his knee, but the adrenaline pumping through his veins kept him moving. The boy walked downstairs with his leg hurt, where one of the ride's surprised operators met him. Almost immediately, Shockwave was stopped, and Mike Crutchman and the Edwards brothers immediately asked to get off. They were so shaken by the events unfolding before their eyes that they didn't want to be on the roller coaster again. The ride's operators assured them that the coaster was safe, and they were not allowed to disembark even though they wanted to. While park paramedics attended to a thoroughly shaken and injured Eamon, the ride continued. In the end, one of the operators gave the boys passes for a free trip on the coaster. They did not use them. Afterward, they weren't detained or asked any questions, and a few minutes later, the boys met up with some of their parents and recounted the incident. It was only then that the parents reported it to park officials. So, was Enan's harness genuinely problematic? Was the ride in poor condition? And was there actual evidence to cause him to fear for his life? In the aftermath of the incident, park officials inspected the ride, and it was found that there was nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, that's
Every harness mechanism was in proper shape. The safety locks worked as intended, and there was no indication of a mechanical failure or
there's no possible way that the safety locks were working properly if he was able to slip out. Period. Because, I mean, in a coaster situation like that, you should be fully restrained in that location so that you don't fall off, right? And that you can't slip out and that you can't wiggle out. Because it's not like they're unaware that patrons of these parks might do dumb things, right? Like, for instance, one of the reasons they got rid of the sky buckets in Disneyland is because they had multiple people try and jump out of the sky buckets. One of the reasons they got rid of the people mover is because people would try and jump out of the people mover, and it ended up the next car behind them would crush them because they stupidly thought, well, this is a slow moving ride. There's no way I'm in any danger here, right? People are stupid. And so the restraint systems are supposed to be to not only protect you from the G-forces, but also to protect you from your own stupidity. And if this kid was able to slide out of the restraints, that's a major problem.
Tampering. Brian Gentilini, a supervisor in the Hanover County Building Inspector's office and the man who inspected the ride after the death of Timothy Van, stated that since the ride was in proper working order, there was no case. Susan Lomax, a spokeswoman for King's Dominion, stated that in light of the recent amusement park deaths, Eamon must have felt too afraid to truly relax on the ride, and that his restless thoughts influenced his perception of the ride. Nothing was actually wrong, he just felt that something was, compelling him to act before anything could be done, leading to injury and stress for himself. Although this seemed to be the case, Eamon McIntyre's father disagreed. According to him, the only safety device that worked on that whole ride was when his son jumped off it, and King's Dominion was in denial over the entire incident. He said, "They don't think their machine can fail. If it happened now, it could happen again."
I'd have to agree with his father on that one. He's 13. He's 13. You can't, seriously, how can you not properly restrain a 13-year-old into, if you can't do that, then you need to increase your height restrictions and your weight restrictions, because that's some bullshit. You can't have a 13-year-old panic on your ride and be able to slip out of the restraints.
But despite everyone's concern, no other incident ever occurred on Shockwave. With its decreasing popularity and the closure of Togo's American offices, King's Dominion finally announced on July 9, 2015, that the roller coaster would permanently close. After operating for nearly 30 years and accommodating over 22 million riders, demolition began in November 2015, and it was replaced by Delirium, a giant frisbee roller coaster, in 2016. But what do you think? Please share your thoughts with us in the comment area below.
I don't think, even though it was probably there when I visited the park back in it was probably 2008 or 2009. I don't think I went on that one, because I'm not a big fan of roller coasters like that. But they do have 3 big wooden roller coasters, and I'm much more of a fan of wooden roller coasters. Anyway, so it sounds like they demolished it years after I left Virginia, but I only went there once, so what a mess. Obviously, if a kid can wiggle out of the restraints, then your restraints are not good enough.